Now, the murder by injection, which is the topic of my speech tonight, is a survey of our healthcare system. Now, when I started this book, I started from scratch because I had had practically no experience with doctors or hospitals in my life. And I really had no idea how they operated or what they were up to. And as I got into it, I really was horrified to find out what is really being done in the name of medicine in this country. Now, there were three people whom I used as guidestones in my research. They were Dr. Emanuel Josephson of New York, whom I had known many years ago, and he wrote a book in 1939 called Your Life is Their Toy, which was a very early book about the drug trust. Now, the second man was a former Washington sports writer named Morris Beale. And,
homeopathic remedy here for a cough.
Oh, give me that, because this just hit me. What, just dropping it?
It's under the tongue. There's one under the tongue. That's
I don't know. No. I hope that'll do it. No, of course, like many of us, I've been fighting a cold the last few weeks. But this one had pretty well disappeared, I thought. Oh, yes, Morris Beale, B-E. Yeah, that's right. B-E-A-L-L-E. Now, Morris Beale was a Washington sports writer and journalist who, when he found out what the doctors were doing, that he thought that was more interesting than any sports games that he had ever looked into. So he started to write about that. And he was the first person, as far as I know, to discover that the Rockefellers controlled all of the major drug companies. Now, when I first read that in Morris Beale, I said, well, this man certainly has done some good work, but he simply is going too far to say this. Now, one family could not control all of the major drug companies. Well, I researched it out, and I found that he was absolutely correct. And in fact, in Murder by Injection, I give the list of officers and directors of each of the major 18 drug companies in the world, and every one of those companies has 2 or 3 people from the Rockefeller interests on their boards. So the influence is very blatant, it's omnipresent, and they do control this entire situation. Now, the third man whom I benefited from was, of course, the late Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, who died very untimely last year. And it was Dr. Mendelsohn who coined the phrase, the Church of Modern Medicine, because he said that medical practice had now become a temple and that its practitioners were beyond reproach, they were little tin gods, and that the people had to do whatever they were ordered to do by these people. He elaborated on this by saying that this Church of Modern Medicine has 4 holy waters, which are vaccination, fluoridation, the silver nitrate, and intravenous feeding. And he commented that as a practicing physician himself, he had found all 4 of these things to be of very doubtful merit in medical practice. But of course that didn't discourage them. They still swear by those 4 things, particularly vaccination and fluoridated water. And one of the last things that Dr. Mendelsohn said before he passed away, he told a friend, Clinton Miller, he said, you know, I've had to come to the conclusion that all of our doctors today are nothing but drug pushers. And that was a harsh assessment, but I would tend to agree with him, because what the doctors are doing, they're simply writing prescriptions for the drug trust and loading people up with all these things. And in the Library of Congress, I found some very small, unknown books by various doctors, doctors who are dissenting from the medical practice over the past 50 or 60 years. One of them was a Dr. W.B. Clark of Indiana, and in his book I found a very interesting sentence. He said, I never saw a case of cancer in an unvaccinated person. Now, he wrote this in 1936. So, to me, that was quite a revelation. And other doctors have said the same thing, that vaccination is really a time bomb within the human system that can go off 5 years, 10 years, 40 years after the end of the vaccination. You can have this time bomb go off. You can have a stroke, a heart attack, because it's always there in your system. You never get rid of it. And apparently it's always an alien force in your physique. Now, one of the things that I have found in the healthcare movement in this country is that we tend to be too modest about the situation. Some of them call it alternative health care. But I say that it's not an alternative, because the alternative really is death if you don't get away from this malpractice of the licensed physicians. So to me, the choice is between health care and unhealthy care. So what you want to find is the health care which will benefit you, and you want to stay away from the unhealthy care and the drugs and radical surgery of the AMA. Now, modern medicine today in the United States is a $650 billion a year business. And it is a business. It's not a profession. It's strictly a business. Now, our new president is very concerned about health care problems. He is so concerned that he has chosen a presidential commission on health care. And as chairman of this commission, he has named Senator John D. Rockefeller IV. So you have nothing more to worry about, because the family that controls the drug trust is now carrying out Bush's recommendation to improve health care in the United States. So you see, things are in good hands. Now, I was really shocked at how political the AMA was when I began to investigate it, because I say I'd never had any contact with it. I did meet a doctor here in Florida who was so disgusted with what his fellow doctors were doing to the American people that he didn't quit the AMA, he quit the medical profession. And he even gave me his card. He said, "Eustace, you can have my card." So I have a card as membership in the AMA today. Of course, it's not in my name, but I do have the card. And he would not practice anymore, and this man was a very conscientious physician, and I think he could have done a lot of good. But you see, what happens is you cannot be an individual in medical practice today because of the unionization of the profession. And even as a conscientious physician, he would have to go and be on the staff of a hospital or take his patients over to a hospital where he would know personally that they were not going to be treated the way they should be. And rather than endure that, he just got out of the whole profession. Now, I had another friend in Chicago, a very good doctor. We used to have dinner together quite frequently over the years. And he also finally quit because he told me some horror stories about what was going on in the hospitals. He said that a neighbor had had a stroke, a man in his 60s, and that they were his best friends, and that they took this man to the hospital, and all he needed was rest and bed care to see, what developed from the stroke. But the surgeons at the hospital got together and they chopped open his chest and they did all sorts of things, and they charged him $35,000, and of course he died. And this doctor told me this almost with tears in his voice, that they would have done this to one of his best friends and his neighbors. Now you can multiply that sort of thing by many thousands throughout the United States to find out what the medical practitioners are doing. Now we have to ask ourselves, what are the achievements of the American Medical Association? What does it have to offer in its defense? The only thing I can find that the AMA has done, it has enthroned a particular school of medicine which is called allopathy, and replaced our traditional, natural, homeopathic remedies, which pretty well gave us good health during the 19th century.